We have a very full program, so I'm excited to get started. My name is Josh Harrison. I'm a member of the board of directors for Columbus Metropolitan Club. Excited to welcome you here today. Now for today's forum on nonprofits navigating a changing landscape, which is sponsored by the Ohio State University, Taft, and in partnership with the Association of Fundraising Professionals of Central Ohio. We have associates and guests of those organizations with us here today. Please give them a round of applause. Today's forum will address the changing landscape of nonprofits. Remember that nonprofit is a tax and legal status and not a business strategy. As such, as the business environment changes through technology, through changing demographics, and changing consumer preferences, it is incumbent upon our nonprofits to understand, plan, and even take advantage of those changes. And with that, I'm going to introduce our panel. Closest to me, we have Rachel Lustig, President and CEO of Catholic Social Services, Dale Heydlauff, Senior Vice President of Corporate Communications with AEP and President of their foundation, Aslyne Rodriguez, Co-founder and CEO of EmPowerBus, and Lisa Courtice, President and CEO of United Way of Central Ohio. Let's give them a round of applause. The podium is yours, Lisa.
So what a great turnout for our sector, right? I hear that only the governor, perhaps, and a senator sells this out, and now it's the nonprofit sector, so woohoo! So thanks to CMC for lifting up this important topic, and to our sponsors, especially AFP, who I understand gave many shout-outs to propel people to attend today to learn about these important trends in our sector. We are a powerful force for good and progress. Today, in Columbus, not Franklin County, but Columbus, there are 6,429 nonprofits. You have your pick. In Ohio today, there are over 70,000 nonprofits. The last research report on our sector locally, this nonprofit sector, was tied for the largest employer, the third largest employer in our community, tied with hospitality and retail. Columbus is a wonderful community to be in this sector and to help lead a nonprofit organization. You may have heard me say that when I started my Columbus career 20 years ago, my first leadership role was at the New Directions Career Center. And I couldn't believe after the first week on the job that the numbers of people that actually returned my phone call. It was like a new way of working. I had been in Washington, D.C. and San Francisco and Akron, where at the end of the day, I understood people just threw their messages, we wrote them on pink pieces of paper at that time, in the trash and started over the next day. So I was delighted to have actual phone calls with real people and real funders. So as we launch this new year of leadership and service, together we are joined by our three esteemed panelists to share their perspectives on our challenges and our opportunities. The topics that we'll explore today include public policy, demographics, technology, and the new way that we all acquire information. So we have three different perspectives. We have Rachel, who is a very progressive leader of a traditional nonprofit serving 23 counties in Ohio. And Dale, who's a foundation president, funder, and a corporate communications leader. And Aslyne, she and her business partner, Jerry Tsai, Jerry, can you raise your hand? Woo-hoo. Created a social enterprise to solve a community problem, choosing to form an LLC, not a 501. So probably on many of our minds, we'll start with the elephant in the room, and I will open it up to the panelists to share with us how they believe the new Tax Cuts and Job Act will impact giving, and will these new laws make charitable giving increasingly an activity mainly for the wealthy?
I'll take the first crack at that. I have been a proud and happy member of the WSU Public Media Board for 10 years. And at our last board meeting, our president, who's also CPA, actually gave a presentation on this topic, and I will admit I hadn't really thought much about it. And it was alarming. It was alarming because as we look at the members of WSU Public Media, they all fall in an income demographic that has now lost the incentive to itemize deductions and thereby take any advantage in terms of charitable deductions. So I did some research, and the research, had mixed results. So here's from the Academy of American Philanthropy. In 2016, the total philanthropic giving nationally was an astounding $390 billion. The Joint Committee on Taxation has calculated that because they have increased the standard deduction to $12,000 for individuals, $24,000 for couples filing jointly, everyone in an income level from 0 to 200,000 approximately has lost any incentive to deduct, to do itemized deductions. You may not know that 71% of all charitable giving comes from individuals, and most of that comes from people who are in that income range. So therein lies, I think, the challenge. I would state I searched and found no studies that would explain what motivates or what the mindset is of that demographic. To what extent were they making charitable contributions out of a pure altruistic desire to support the mission or function of that nonprofit versus making a gift to lower their tax liability? And I would submit it may be a combination of both, and that while they may still give, maybe they won't give as much, knowing that they're not going to get that tax credit. For the wealthy, it makes no difference whatsoever. They'll continue to itemize deductions. For the social services nonprofits, you should know most of those gifts come from that demographic that won't itemize anymore. When you look at where the wealthy give a lot of their charitable giving predominantly goes to the arts and universities. That will continue. So I think it has some potentially profound implications. I haven't found a lot of people in my life, my circle of friends, my family members who pay a lot of attention to the tax code. So I'm not sure you're going to see the implications of this right away. They probably don't even realize it until they do their 2018 taxes in 2019. And they suddenly realize, there's no reason for me to itemize anymore. I'll just take the standard deduction. So maybe you don't see the effect in 18, but you might in 19. And I know we're going to get to communications, but I think what this compels all nonprofits to do is to come up with really sharp, compelling stories and comprehensive communication strategies and tactics to tell those stories so that you make certain that what truly motivates giving is a desire to support that nonprofit and not some value they might get in their tax return.
Dale, you've done an excellent job. I know the research that you're presenting is phenomenal. I think for us as running a nonprofit, I think we have always thought that many of our donors do this because they want to contribute to the community, not necessarily that they were hoping to get the tax deduction. But that's a very pragmatic reality, and it will impact people. So preparing for a transition, which you're right, it's probably 2 to 3 years down the line, is definitely something that we and other organizations in the sector have got to do. The other element of if we could talk about the tax and its implications, is not just on how it's going to impact nonprofits internally, that's critically important, but also going to impact the landscape within which we work. We are here, many nonprofit organizations are meeting a community need. For me, the big concern right alongside of that deduction is whether or not this is going to impact the population that we are called to serve. Since 1980, we have seen wealth disparity increase, and there is some reason to believe that this tax and other things happening are going to continue to accelerate that wealth disparity. That is one of the biggest things putting pressure on our need to perform. So there are internal and external implications to this tax policy, our capacity to meet our need in the community, and whether or not we're going to have the funding to be able to do it.
Aslyne's been quiet because she doesn't have to really care about us, I know, but. So organizational forms, once rare in the nonprofit sector, such as the LLC, are growing in popularity. More and more donors are setting up LLCs and not foundations. For example, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And more LLCs are being established as the vehicle for solving community problems. Crowdfunding, where typically there's no tax deduction, moves billions of dollars, and organizational status is not a factor. Impact investing targets businesses and organizations and can produce financial gains for the investor. So how important is organizational status now and in the future?
So I'll pipe up now. When we were thinking about EmPowerBus, we thought about it as the idea of strengthening the roads to social mobility. And by doing so, we wanted to provide dignified, on-time, reliable transportation to and from employment, healthcare, and education. Rachel was talking about the disparity between, the class disparity. And so we know that transportation is a big piece of that. And so we chose not to do that because we wanted to say we're rooted in a social problem, right? There are transportation companies here that serve people's needs. And for us, when we were thinking about forming as a nonprofit or an LLC, we said, well, what we want to do is make the center of who we serve and what we do be the people that don't have access to. And so it didn't make sense to us at the time to be a nonprofit because we saw ourselves as a for-profit agency rooted in social good. Blake Makowski, who is the founder of Tom's Shoes, didn't invent Tom's Shoes. What he did was he gave shoes a purpose. And he started a book called Start Something That Matters. And he's very forthcoming with saying we're a business and we have a business mind and we're an LLC and we want to operate in that way. And so for us, it's a bit of a mindset of who we want to be, but where we're positioned is that we are an LLC because we are a business that wants to help the community thrive. And we didn't want to have to think about the other legs of what nonprofits have to think about. Because I've been in the nonprofit. I just was the chief operating officer for Weld. I was the executive director of After School All Stars. And it's good and hard work. And we think about ourselves as a business serving one specific area. And so that was a focus for us. And we see ourselves as a partner to nonprofits because we want to help organizations like Moms to Be. We do not want to be Moms to Be. We want to be the resource that gets their moms to programming to stop infant mortality. So our perspective is that we want to be a catalyst that helps for-profit agencies think about how do you root yourself in social good.
Lisa, if I could jump in on this, I think there's a true blurring of the lines of what would be traditional nonprofits. I've got a religious sister, a nun, who sits on my board, and one of her first comments to me was no margin, no mission. Nonprofits, when we did our strategic plan 4 years ago, one of our strategic priorities was to become more business-minded, to be more efficient in the way that we deliver our services, to find economies of scale where possible, to scale our services. I mean, we're providing service in the senior arena, and we are in a massive growth industry. I know we're going to talk about demographic shifts in just a minute, and that's one of them. We provide low-cost, high-impact services that the community needs. How do we bring them to more people? So as a nonprofit organization, it just means that we take our margin and we put it back into the organization. But we have to have a margin in order for us to be able to advance our mission, and truly operationalizing a lot of the practices of business has become our modus operandi.
I look around this room and I see a lot of nonprofit leaders who have, over the last, since I've been in my role 10 plus years now, have created and in some cases dramatically expanded their social enterprises. And in doing so, they have pretty significantly diminished their reliance on philanthropy to meet the critical mission that they serve. So, and I don't know if Alan Proctor's in the room or not. I think a lot of you know that I am a huge advocate of social enterprise. And there are tools out there and organizations prepared to help you. So Social Ventures, which Alan leads, does provide assistance and counseling and support to help you, because I realize a lot of nonprofits don't come to their task, imbued with great business skills. They may get some of that from their board, and I hope they tap that fully. But there are nonprofits who are out there providing services to help you build, create, and then grow social enterprises so that you can increase your earned revenue and thereby diminish your dependency on charitable giving.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Dale. I think we've seen several successful examples of social enterprises, and I think one of the things that has really helped us at Catholic Social Services to do is to think about our process efficiency for even the programs that we do have that aren't revenue generating. But I never want us to forget that there are social needs that we are being called upon to provide and to meet, where the laws of economics, where supply and demand do not meet, and we have decided that it's still a right for people within our community to have access to things. I'm thinking of health care, and I'm thinking of transportation and food, where it'll be difficult to engage the market in order to get that client population to truly pay for it. Now, so it doesn't mean that there's not a place for social enterprise, but there are limits to where social enterprise can be effective when you're being asked to do that.
How is EmPowerBus funded?
So we're funded by having the companies. So our primary focus is workforce transportation. So getting folks that would otherwise, WOSU did a study called Chasing the Dream, Poverty and Opportunities in America, and they talked about transportation to work taking anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so we know that that's a pain point for manufacturing and distribution centers. So we went to a manufacturing and distribution center in New Albany Beauty Park, and we said, listen, we can promise your people will be here on time, and on time means a half an hour early, and that we want to talk about retention and recruitment. So this is a pain point big enough that companies are putting the skin in the game, and so that company paid for the transportation of their employees. It was New Americans off of Morris Road. If they were to take transportation to work, it would take them an hour and 49 minutes. That's a 15-minute walk to the appropriate bus station, 3 bus transfers. The longest somebody was on our bus was a little over half an hour. And when there was an emergency, because we felt responsible for that individual being at work without a vehicle, we made sure that they got to their emergency destination. And it was a mom who had a sick child at Nationwide Children's Hospital. I got a call within 30 minutes that worker was from New Albany down in Nationwide Children's Hospital to address that issue. That's our responsibility. But those companies saw that as a value add to their employees and to their bottom line.
I know Alan Proctor, I don't believe, is here, but Tony Wells is here, president of the Wells Foundation and a pioneer in this space. So thank you, Tony, for your leadership. Well, we certainly know that the demographics are changing and have changed in our community in the decades forthcoming, that people of color will be the majority in our country. And we know that right now, people of color are disadvantaged. Higher percentages of people that are disadvantaged and disenfranchised are people of color. So what does this changing demographic, what are the opportunities it presents to our sector, and what are the challenges? And we, as Rachel also noted, the numbers of people who are increasing in age and will be like never before. And we also, as another example, see children ages 4 and under at record levels of living in poverty like we've never seen. So what are the challenges and opportunities of all these changing demographics?
We see it as a great workforce replenishment opportunity, actually. I'll give you a specific example. We have a hard time attracting and retaining linemen in Columbus. It's a great job, hard work, to be sure. But if they're willing to put the time in, and that includes a fair amount of overtime, they can earn a 6-figure income. But the first chance they get to move out to one of the rural areas of Ohio, they take it because their standard of living, quality of life significantly increases. And then we discovered the Ethiopian Tuohedo Social Services Organization. And actually the director of our distribution operations here in Ohio joined their board, in part because he saw a pipeline of new talent. People eager to work, have the physical skill sets, have the mental skill sets to do this work. And we have as a core objective as a corporation to continue to drive towards having a workforce that mirrors and reflects the diversity of the communities that we serve. We put a lot of attention on it. We have 7, I think, employee resource groups that help guide us and direct us and advise us. We have a corporate diversity council that's constantly looking at what measures, what goals, what objectives we should put in place to make sure we're achieving that aim. I think it's great. What we have found working with the Ethiopian organization is these people are eager to work. They've got a great work ethic. They come in great credentials, may not be recognized yet in the United States, which is a challenge for them, but we certainly do, and as long as they're prepared to do the work and go through our apprentice program, and we're eager to have them.
At Catholic Social Services, we have the blessing of really sitting at the intersection of senior service work and with families. And one of our largest family initiatives here in Franklin County is with the Our Lady of Guadalupe Center. So we have the opportunity to work with a growing Latino community. And I think what we are seeing, I'm a German immigrant. My grandparents came from Germany. I think we're seeing in the new Hispanic community a lot of those characteristics, that desire to work, family-focused, education-focused, and we've got the same kind of community center that helped people in my generation, or when my grandparents immigrated, succeed, create the right community, stabilize the situation, and then help to create workforce development opportunities. And I think that we're seeing tremendous benefits by having a diverse community with many Latinos in leadership in our and leadership in our area. On the senior side, one of the beautiful parts about a senior population is how they can contribute post-retirement age. And we have last year had about 125,000 hours of volunteer hours from our senior population. So if we're going to respond to a growing aging population in a way that is empowering, seniors are going to be the best part of the solution, helping to drive ways to bring about those changes. So when we look at it from an opportunity lens, I think there can be a lot of good vehicles or roads ahead of us.
I also think going back to what we're rooted in is around social mobility. So Harvard did a study on social mobility and around zip codes and transportation and what that meant for the climb up the class rungs, if you will. And so what we know is that it's about access and opportunity, right? And so as the demographics start to shift, as folks of color start to tip the scale right here, we have to talk about access and we have to talk about opportunity. And that's why EmPowerBus is rooted in that. It's about access to education, it's about access to workforce, it's about employment, and it's about access to healthcare. Those are the 3 indicators of what your life will be like in your lifetime if you're looking at folks in certain areas. And so we have to think about access and opportunity and where we're placing things. Many of you know that Kroger just left Cleveland Avenue. And so what does that mean? That means that there's not going to be a grocery store there, and we use this word food desert, right? So, okay, so that happens. So where's the access now? Is that EmPowerBus goes and picks people up in the community and takes them to a grocery store where they have access to fresh fruits and vegetables? I hope so. But we have to start thinking about that. So when things are taken away from a community, how are we putting back in that allows them to have that access and opportunity? That's going to be the critical point of what it looks like with the demographics. You hear stories all the time. I see Elizabeth Martinez from Big Brothers Big Sisters, and you hear them talk about when a child has access, what does that mean for their success, right? If you've never had the opportunity to fence, and all of a sudden somebody puts a saber in your hand and now you're a world-class fencer, what does that mean for your education? Well, there's studies done for kids who do sports like fencing and kids who do sports like basketball and what that looks like for their lifetime, right? And so I think that's the thing that's going to be really important about this demographic shift, is around access and opportunity, and how we continue to wrap our head around that as nonprofits and social enterprises.
So related to access and opportunity, we know that diverse minds and perspectives make better decisions together. So I have been concerned throughout my career of the lack of diversity on our boards. Do you have a board, an LLC board?
We don't.
Okay, but you might?
Yes.
Okay, and it'll be very diverse?
Yes.
We're going to hold you to that.
Yes,
yeah. We are. Yeah. So the Chronicle, so I have seen little to no diversity, despite some fabulous programs that we have in our community to inspire and train people of diversity. I've seen very little movement. And the Chronicle of Philanthropy this week put out a report by Board Source that indicated that 84% of boards and nonprofit boards in our country are white, 90% of all board chairs are white, and 25% of boards are all white. And these stats are identical to the Board Source study that was done 20 years ago. So this is a call to our community, and what can we do to change this?
I think this is coming from an organization that mirrors that challenge as well. We have a tremendously diverse management leadership that I'm very proud of, but our board is not overly diverse. I think the more that we can do to create opportunities for diverse leaders to be a part of boards, and I know that those who are great leaders get tapped frequently, find themselves on several boards, and for those that do that, I think our entire community owes you a tremendous debt of gratitude. So where can we open up additional vehicles for mentoring people onto the types of boards that we have today? It's a difficult challenge to be a part of a board. When I talk about 9 hours, that's how many hours I have of board meetings over the course of the year. And I need to provide you with quality information that you can digest quickly in order to make with me what are some tremendously challenging decisions. So how do we prepare people to be a part of that discussion in an effective way? And I think mentoring, I think continuing to build and grow our circles are the best strategies that we've got. But if you've got any other suggestions, I am open to them.
I was trying to remember how many different boards I've served on in the last 10 or 15 years. So if it gives you any comfort, I can tell you every board I'm on talks about this. We're all committed to trying to improve the diversity of board. I will also tell you, and be real honest about it, we get lots of requests for AP executives to serve on boards. And almost always they ask for, a member of, a diverse candidate. And we aren't, blessed with a huge pool. And those that we have, tend to get 1 or 2 assignments. But I also think diversity needs to be represented in as broad as possible context. When I have counseled nonprofit leaders, I have said, if you're smart, you're going to attract a very engaged board and one that fills essential skills gaps that you have or your leadership team has. I mean, every board needs to have an attorney. It'd be great to have someone who's got HR experience, someone good at finance, someone who's good at marketing and communication, someone who's skilled at fundraising. So you want to look at all of those competencies and make sure they're represented on your board. And I always ask nonprofits when they come and ask for an AP executive, where do you have those gaps? And I'll try to find you someone with those skills and experiences. But I can't promise you a person of diversity, because we're still working on it. Our journey and our commitment towards diversity is sound, but we're not there yet. And we know it. And so you be patient with us, I think.
So I had the privilege of being the executive director of After School All Stars. And when I came in, we weren't a very strong board. In fact, I wanted all the board to just kind of go away, if I'm being honest, to rebuild it. Some of you in the room have thought that. That's okay. But what was never.
Board members here never.
But what was critical for me was that they were mission focused and that they brought the skill set that we needed that Dale was talking about. And so I started with one. I started with one board member who I knew had the passion and who had the connections to help me navigate a very diverse board. And actually what was a help for us is, and I'm looking right at him, Kevin from Leadership Columbus. It was Leadership Columbus that really helped us. We had put out a project, and a class from Leadership Columbus worked on that project. So one, we knew those people were passionate because they worked on a project. And then we said, will you please stay and help us? And we had tremendous talent. We had folks from Cardinal Health, we had folks, but not just in terms of, I'm not talking about just industry, but in thought, in diversity, in gender. That was really important to me. And part of it is that I'm a Latina and I'm sitting in a seat where I want to see other people that look like me. That's part of it too, if I'm being honest. I want to see other people be at the table to have that conversation about how do we give access and opportunity to kids after school. Regardless of social economic status, kids can get into anything, but the kids I was serving had higher potential of getting into negative influencers. So I needed people who were passionate, I needed people who had the right skill set, and I wanted people that kind of looked a little bit like me too. That helped around the discussion.
I'm going to overgeneralize for a moment and say that society used to pay more attention than we do now to the source of the information that we gain or learn. And we're bombarded with content. So it used to be, I remember, give a hoot, don't pollute, like the public service announcement was like it, right? And I do not pollute, give a hoot. So, but we don't have that same value, I don't think, as a sector anymore, because you can't figure out who it's coming from, where it's coming from, and what source it's coming from. So are we playing in this space well as a sector, and what can we do to better get our message out?
That's interesting, Lisa. We were just talking about this morning. I mean, there's people who are saying that the fact that the nonprofit voice wasn't heard around tax is an indication of how ineffective we are being at taking that voice forward. And this was the Human Service Chamber coming together, a great convener of nonprofits. And we were also talking about the competition that we have across the sector. And I think that's part of the reality. But I think more than anything, we have a sacred story to tell. People entrust their lives to us and ask us to help them make that better. But their life is so often very different from so many other people in our community. So we have a tremendous empathy gap to overcome. So while the vehicle is challenging for getting the message out, the message in and of itself is also very complicated. I think social media presents us with a tremendous opportunity to be able to get that message out in more forums with a lower barrier to entry. But how do we do it in a way that both builds our mission up, builds our clients up, and then builds the sector up is something that we've still got to focus a tremendous amount of energy on. And doing that while fake news is coming at you is challenging.
So it is my day job to think about these things. We just went through last year an employee communication strategy project where we realized we weren't penetrating our workforce, that our key corporate messages weren't getting through, that our workforce was largely ignorant of what the primary challenges and opportunities and objectives and goals of the corporation were. So we did a study and we found some interesting things. And we all know this intuitively. I mean, we're bombarded with messaging. And we have to be in the channels that our diverse employee base or customer audience wants us in. But we are skimmers and scammers. Scanners. Skimmers and scanners. Scammers too in some cases, but scanners. And we're very visual learners. So you've got to catch them with pictures and videos, and you've got to do it within seconds, and you have to be in all of those different channels. So the nonprofit world needs to have people skilled in this area. Particularly in the social media and all of the different channels. And believe me, they won't be static. They're going to change, and you need to follow them into those different channels if you want to be effective and you want to get your messages out. As we go back to talking about financial challenges, this is going to be key to selling yourself and selling your message and selling your story. And they need to be stories that captivate, or you're not going to touch them and move them.
I think in the case of social enterprise right now, if I'm being honest, it's a sexy word to people. Like, they're like, social enterprise, you know? And that also still just means hard work. And it means messaging yourself appropriately. And in the case of us, you know, social enterprise fits in nonprofit. Social enterprises are within nonprofits and within LLCs. And in the case of what EmPowerBus is doing is that we see ourselves as like the intersection between economic development and community development. Because we see, again, going back to workforce being the primary client we're serving, is that we are helping folks get to stable jobs. That stable job meant a lot to my grandparents when they came here from Puerto Rico and worked at the steel mills, and my grandma worked at the pillow factory. Right? That job allowed 2 generations later, kids, myself and my siblings, to go to college and have our master's degree and be fairly successful on the line of, if you're looking at an immigrant's family trajectory. Because we had access and opportunity. And so that messaging for us is that we are strengthening the road to social mobility. So workforce, so these companies now are having their folks show up to work, be on time, retain them so that they're not seeing this bottom line loss on retraining, right? And then these families are having this stable home, which allows them to think about what it means for their families. Oh, and let's talk about if they need to get to health care. So what if they need a trip to the doctor? How do we work with nonprofits that are doing that already to maybe cut that down and expand the reach? Or what about education and internships? If you're a first generation child going to college and you've never heard of an internship or you don't have a car, what does that look like if a college said, this bus is for you to get to your internship downtown, right? And you all open up your door and say, we're excited to have you, and you pay for that student to get there. What does that do for them? That is critical and crucial. Oh, and when we're not serving that, what if we open it up to you all, right? If you all have purpose and you say, hey, EmPowerBus, we need a bus for this X event for our company, we would look and say, okay, we're not, at that point, we're not serving our mission, the bus is available. Yes, we invite you to come and use our bus because you're feeding our mission. And our mission is based on getting folks to a stable home that we all deserve and a community that we all deserve to live in that's safe and healthy and happy. And that's the message we will continue to push because we can and because I think that that's what people care about, community development and economic development. And when you can bridge those, you have a little bit of magic.
I'm hearing 2 themes from...
Can I ask you one?
Oh, sure.
Those of you who have questions, please start coming to the podium or the microphone. Yes. And then, Rachel, I'm sorry.
No,
please.
that's fine. As I'm listening to what Aslyne and Dale are saying, I'm hearing kind of 2 themes that we talk about all the time at Catholic Social Services, and one of them is about the impact, and I hear you talking about that so significantly. And then, Dale, I heard you talking about quality pretty extensively. I think that is where the nonprofit sector has got to be moving. William Macassill is an Oxford professor, wrote a book about the nonprofit sector, said 75% of our efforts aren't making a difference. Now, he was looking at a lot of international type of work where I think it gets a little bit more complicated. But I think if we have an obligation to the people that we serve and to our community to be investing in the types of programs that are making a difference in our community, where outcomes for individuals and the community are realized and are important at the top of the list. It's too important to our clientele not to. But the other reality is about quality. Dale, you mentioned that you've got to have somebody who's got the skills of communication. Well, you also need the skills of finance. You also need the skills of development. It requires a lot of professionalism to be a part of the nonprofit sector. And, in this era where we're also talking about Me Too, I think it's even that much more critical that we in the nonprofit sector think about quality and take it very, very, very seriously, because the nonprofit sector has at its basis an inherent power imbalance, where the client and the person who's providing the service are not on the same power level. And so if you are not the type of organization that has the quality infrastructure to ensure that those people are protected in your care, we know that bad things can and do happen. And so those two priorities, if we're not paying attention to how the quality of the nonprofit sector, and we're not paying attention to the impact, we're missing a huge opportunity. And I think that goes to what we should be evaluated on. We as the nonprofit sector do a lot to make sure that we're showing people transparency, that we're keeping our overhead low. And I think it's important that we continue to put more and more of the focus on the quality and the impact that your organization is making.
Please state your name and your organization and refrain from editorial comments, although I would like to hear them offline.
My name's Brent Foley. I'm with Triad Architects. Hopefully my question's good because I came all the way from the back corner over here to ask it. I was struck as we were just talking about the diversity on the board, and in my head, we're always thinking, well, why do we want diversity? And one of the reasons we want diversity is perhaps so that we have representation of the people that are being served in the leadership. And I'm struck often that we feel like we're doing things for people, which is kind of like doing things to people. What strategies do you guys look at to use to do things with people to empower change?
Multifaceted infrastructure for ensuring that there are ways for our clients to be involved in shaping their own destiny. So first and foremost, I kind of mentioned that grievance policy. That's pretty critical. Satisfaction surveys, focus groups, and advisory boards. We unfortunately don't have a client represented on our board. It is something we've talked about and something we would consider, but those other channels are critically important to us.
I don't have a board right now, but I will tell you in talking about the people that we're serving and how they feel involved in EmPowerBus. So I would ride the bus at 4 o'clock in the morning when we were taking 5:30 when we were taking folks to work, and Jerry would ride it at night, and we did it the entire pilot. And one of the things I remember texting him and saying, this doesn't feel like a community. I want it to be a classroom on wheels. So we had some ESL classes in the bus, right, while they were on their way to work. But I was talking with a nonprofit, the one that we worked with, called Us Together, and I said, and another one, and I said, I don't know, we're not building the community. He said, because you're not going in the community, you're just going to pick people up. So we've thought about, what does it look like to go celebrate holidays and to think about the sports the kids play? And what about if we take them to the groceries ourselves on the weekend? So that's something we are being critical of. And when we do have a board, we will make sure that our folks are on the bus are represented.
Next question.
Yes, hello. My name's John McKnight, and I work for Rife's Auto Body. Outside of my work, though, I also serve as the volunteer coordinator for WCBE, which is a public nonprofit radio station here in Columbus. So I'm immersed a lot of hours a week in the nonprofit world because of that. Columbus, to me, seems like it's a very giving community, but I've run into some people in the nonprofit industry that disagree with me. They say that they don't think Columbus is as giving as it needs to be or as it could be. How does Columbus compare to other cities out there, in any method that you want to make the comparison. Are we giving as much, per person? Are as many people in Columbus donating to nonprofits and supporting the nonprofits as they are in other cities? Are we competitively nonprofit, or are we lacking a little bit?
I do think we slipped. So anyone's interested, I couldn't believe the amount of information I could find with the Almanac of American Philanthropy. And one of the things it found that of the top 50 cities, when they looked at the top 50 cities and the per capita philanthropic giving or charitable giving, Columbus, which is I think the 14th largest city now, ranked 39th out of 50. So we have slipped. I think there was a time when we were much higher, but we have slipped.
So then part two of the question is, how do we fix that? Columbus is great on so many levels. How do we get back?
I think that's Lisa's job, because I think that's... The United Way has to lead that. But one of the other things But here but I want to point out one thing that's really interesting that I also found in that research, and thank you for your volunteer service. What the Almanac of American Philanthropy found is that people who volunteer are 11 times more likely to give philanthropically than people who do not, and give 11 times as much or more than those who don't volunteer. So, but maybe this one's a really good one for you. How do we build a culture of philanthropic giving?
I thought we had one, and he's a Debbie Downer over there. I don't think it's necessarily higher than other communities, but when you're in it, doesn't it feel like it's higher than other communities that we don't know about? No, it feels good, yeah. Yes.
Hi, I'm Grace Hunter with City of Columbus Mayor's Office, but I'm here because I'm a board member with LifeSmart Education, small nonprofit here in town. One of the main services we provide is life skills training and mentoring for high school students. But we're one of many that do that, and with the smaller ones, we feel ineffective because we're kind of competing for the funding. And with everything that's changing with the landscape and the possible reduction in donations and things, how do we compete? Should we compete? I mean, is it more of a partnership? How do you guys feel we can be more effective in what we do?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think one of the trends that I see happening is that we're seeing kind of a tremendous amount of pressure on smaller nonprofits. That I think in where we're headed is we're seeing some of those more larger nonprofits that have a diverse array of programs, and then maybe some boutique style smaller nonprofits with one or two funding sources. What I think is a nice way of channeling that is when I see those types of programs coming together, because it does require a certain level of sophistication in order to get some of that back office support, that financial, that HR, that development. So when I see nonprofits coming together with other like-minded programs that have a similar process, I think there can be a good amount of work doing. The challenge will be to kind of ensure that we can stay true to those grassroots types of strengths that many nonprofits that are small can bring, and take what can be some of the strengths of the larger ones, the capacity to tap into best practices, the capacity to do research. So I think we need to be a little fluid and open to where the opportunities present themselves.
We can take one more question.
Hi there. My name is Andrea Applegate, president of Applegate Talent Strategies, and I also happen to be the chair of the Jazz Arts Group board. I am interested in your opinions on what we can do to overcome the perception that people have, donors have, about giving for operational or overhead versus for project work.
I feel strongly on that as well. So I want to go back to the comments that I was making before about how, as a leader in the nonprofit sector, when I talk about our work, I always put forward that we're providing quality service and that we're making an impact. And I think that there is a growing openness to saying, well, then tell me what is that costs. if we push the discussion, if we continue to push that discussion towards saying, if we can deliver on what we say we can, and if we can ensure that the quality is where it needs to be, then sometimes we've got to spend money to ensure that we can have HR to hire the type of people that we need to hire. That we can, there's a lot of things that aren't really all that exciting to support that ensure that our clients are safe in our care. And that's what we've got to sell them. We've got to sell them on what the difference is that their dollars makes by supporting our operations.
I think most people in this room know we give operating grants all the time and have no hesitation doing that. We get it. And programmatic and capital gifts as well, and endowment gifts. I'm a huge proponent of endowment gifts too, but I completely get it, Andrea.
Well, I think if you look at the demographics of nonprofits, you see women being more of the gender that is in the nonprofit sector, and I'm going to put my old weld hat on for a second, and would tend to be the ones that are service leaders and will take a lower salary and maybe not have a 401k and not have the best benefits because you're purpose driven, and that's amazing. Except it would be nice to see the community understand that what we need to do is be able to make sure that the folks that provide these services are adequately supported as well, because they have families and they have dreams and hopes, and they too want to feed their purpose, what they feel called to do in their life, but be able to maintain a healthy, happy home, as all of us should. And so I don't think that women should, and I'm not saying it's all women, but you should be able to think about what retirement looks like when you're serving your purpose. And so I think that we should be able to say that up front to folks in the nonprofit donors and such, and say, hey, this is allowing us to keep talent that allows us to drive our purpose, which allows you to have quality programming, which impacts your community.
That's excellent, thank you. I hope you enjoyed today's forum. You can view and share today's forum and all of our forums on CTV Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide through the Ohio channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. I'd like to thank our sponsors, The Ohio State University, Taft, and the Association of Fundraising Professionals of Central Ohio, and of course our panelists and moderator, Dale Heydlauff, Aslyne Rodriguez, Rachel Lustig, and Lisa Courtice. Thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing you at the next CMC. Thank you.